Okay, gang, it's Q&A. Who's up?
I want to know about gaiva,
Yeah.
just like a working definition, and like how to combat it, or like, what different approaches there would be to defeat it, if that's a proper term.
Yeah.
And then also, I guess, about the difference between approaches. Like, I feel like Hasidus is maybe an approach, or maybe not towards this issue, but just in general, Hasidus is an approach to life or something, and so is Musar, and they are contrary or something to one another. I don't really understand the dynamics.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm glad that we have until 10:30 tonight because we do those questions in detail. I'll try to give you some guidance in each. Somehow, in the Mesilas Yesharim, the path of the just or something, has a very interesting definition of what gaiva, which is translated usually as pride, and anova, which is usually translated as humility, what they are. Ramchal says, gaiva is feeling that you deserve credit for your good qualities. Anova is feeling you do not deserve credit for your good qualities. Notice that to have either pride or humility, you have to know you have good qualities. Humility, contrary to many people's intuitions, humility is not thinking I'm a zero. That's not the definition of humility. Furthermore, it's colossally dumb. As the popular motto puts it, I know I'm somebody because God don't make junk. If God creates you and he keeps you alive, that means he trusts you and he has a mission for you. To think that you have no redeeming qualities, that you're worthless, is to insult God's work. Question is, do I deserve credit for my good qualities or don't I? Now, sometimes it's obvious. Both my parents are brilliant. And they gave me special tutoring and so forth and so on. The fact that I'm very bright and very good at scholastic studies, I know that was very largely programmed into me. But what if I worked on it myself? What if I really put in the effort and I sweated to, as we say, achieve it, accomplish it, create it? The truth is that you don't deserve credit for that either. Because all you have in your hand is the ability to make an effort. You don't control the outcome. Any outcome. Not a physical outcome, not a psychological outcome, not even a spiritual outcome. You don't control the outcome. All you have in your hand is the ability to make an effort. All outcomes are due to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's gift. The way you preserve humility is to recognize that the outcome is a gift, and also to recognize that you have no clue how much other people are trying. It doesn't show on the surface how much effort a person is making. And that being the case, you might not even be superior in terms of your effort. So, the Torah tells us that Moses was the humblest of all men. Sometimes I fantasize Moses getting up in the morning saying, I was chosen to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, and I was chosen to take the Torah down from heaven, and I'm very humble. How does he manage that? How can he be humble and be realistic about his greatness? In certain respects, he's the greatest person who ever did live and ever will live, even more so than the Messiah. Because he says to himself, my parents were very special. My father was the leader of the previous generation. My mother was a daughter of Levi. My older sister was a prophet. I wasn't born to just any family. Then at a very young age, I was taken into the palace of Pharaoh and given a king's education. Is it surprising that I have an outstanding career? If I didn't have an outstanding career, it would be a terrible critique, given the resources that were pumped into me. How much of it is mine? All that's mine is the effort. That being the case, no one can determine that. There's a Gemara in Tanis where one of the Tanoim is in the shuk, in the marketplace, and he sees someone, and the person presents a very ugly appearance. So he says, Look how ugly he is. Fellow overhears him and comes over to him and says, "You say I'm ugly? Go to the craftsman that made me." Who's the craftsman that made him? God. Think I'm ugly? Complain to God. Now the Pri Tzaddik says he wasn't just physically ugly, he had bad character traits, bad behavior. The Pri Tzaddik explains what he was saying. By the way, this ugly person was Eliyahu Hanavi, was Elijah the prophet. And he was sent to teach this Tana a lesson, that he had a wrong attitude. Go to the craftsman that made me. Pri Tzaddik said the message was this: you get out of bed in the morning, and your goal for the day is to be perfect. I get out of bed in the morning, and my goal for the day is just not to do something terrible. You're struggling, and I'm struggling. Who says that your struggle is any dearer to God than mine? All we have is the struggle. You got put on the ladder at a certain spot, and I got put on the ladder at a different spot. That had nothing to do with my merit or your merit, where God put you on the ladder. If I struggle on a ladder from 0 to 100, if I struggle from 22 to 32, and you struggle from 86 to 96, we each moved 10 steps. Of course, it's very exciting to get up to 96. You're almost at the top. But that's only because you were put on the ladder at 86. You don't get any credit for that. You don't deserve any credit for that. So that's the difference between humility and pride. Now, one way to avoid pride, the way Ramchal defines it, is to remind yourself of the ways in which God has invested in you. When you look at other people who aren't achieving what you're achieving, it's usually because God didn't invest in them in the ways that He invested in you. And that being the case, you say, I simply have a responsibility to make good on God's investment in me, but not to say that I deserve credit for the things that I have in terms of my character, the things I have accomplished. That's simply a wrong perspective. That's how Moses was able to maintain his humility. And you asked about, was the second question? Oh, Chassidus. Well, that's a big story. I mean, just to summarize Chassidus takes an hour, and it's online. It's recorded. But I'll make a general remark. The Torah is a skeleton, and in order to live it, you have to put flesh on that skeleton. Now, everybody starts with the same skeleton, but the way you flesh it out depends upon your strengths, your weaknesses, your temptations, your inspirations, the time in which you live, the place in which you live, your material resources. All of that determines how you flesh out that skeleton. There are no duplicates. There are no duplicates among Jews, no duplicates among human beings. It means everybody's implementation of Torah in his life is going to be somewhat unique. You can learn from other people some of the options. You can take inspiration for elements that you gravitate naturally to, and you can say, that person does it that way, that well, so I could grow in that direction. But the ultimate mix is going to be something that's unique to you. And the way you do that is really with the advice of someone who's older, who knows Torah sources well, and who you invest in a relationship with that person so that person gets to know you and can say, this would be a reasonable mode of development for you. Yeah.
We brought up last Wednesday the topic of someone passing it on you because someone in their Shabbos is about to die.
Yeah.
And if you feel the desecrated Shabbos, and they say, and you explained the argument being divine providence, whatever it is. I don't know if there's more of like a moral reason for that. Morally, answer that. Morally, why isn't that ethically morally correct?
Well, let's just do a little bit of background. When you say something's morally right or wrong, concrete case, your judgment of what's morally right or wrong leans on two supports. One support is your moral principles, and another support is your understanding of the facts of the case. Two people can have all the same moral principles and can have a different understanding of the facts of the case, and they will judge the action right or wrong based only on the fact that they have different picture of the factual background. So, put it short, what I was saying last week is this: the difference between someone who thinks letting the non-Jew drown is a terrible crime versus someone who thinks letting the non-Jew drown is no crime at all, the difference between them is not their morality. The difference between them is what they think the factual background is. I think anyone who believed that there is a creator and someone who's running the world, and life and death are in his hands, and life and death are what he provides. So he has the authority to determine when a person's life is over. And he says, don't save him. I don't think that person can have a moral critique. He can simply say, I don't believe in divine providence. Okay, that is exactly the point of difference between us. The point of difference between us is not morality. It's a matter of whether you believe in this background condition or you don't. I don't think anyone can have a moral critique of our position if he allows us our premise that God is running the world. So it's not a matter of morality. What some people would like to be able to do is convince the other guy on the basis of his premise. There may not be any way to do that. But that just shows that the fundamental difference between us is not morality. The difference between us is the factual premise. It's like there were bumper stickers in the great abortion wars. If you don't like abortion, don't have one. Why is that colossally stupid? Because having an abortion is not like having an ice cream cone or having a manicure. Those people who are against abortion say that it's murder. If it's murder, it's not a question of my not having one. People are killing other people. I shouldn't be indifferent to that. It's not like just having an ice cream cone. So is it murder or isn't it murder? Is the fetus a human being or isn't the fetus a human being? Those are more or less factual questions. Nobody's in favor of murder. The people who think abortion is okay aren't in favor of murder. They say it isn't murder. So they can't say, so how do I convince them morally not to have abortions? I can't convince them if they think that the fetus is no more than your foot. If that's what they think, I can't convince them. Because that's not where the point of difference is. The point of difference is the fetus a human being or isn't the fetus a human being? Yeah. I'm sorry, yeah? Huh?
These Jews are having strong morals. How do you explain it?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. How do you explain?
For an atheist, doesn't believe in the whole concept of God, right?
Yeah.
Explain to them that Jews are such a strong, view of morals and whatnot. This is just divine providence, and this is just like basic morals, letting someone die.
It isn't basic morals. It isn't basic morals if you believe that God is running the world. It's not basic morals. If he believed that God is running the world, he'd agree with us, and he would say, yes, it's morally right to let him die. A person who thinks it's basic morals doesn't understand how morality works. Is cutting off a person's foot morally right or wrong? Well, suppose he has gangrene, he's going to die. No, you're cutting off his foot. It's obvious. With morality, you don't injure other people. You just don't do that. It's wrong morally to injure other people. Would anybody take that seriously? If he has gangrene, he's going to die otherwise? No, you don't cut off people's feet. You say, you're crazy. There can't be a moral rule not to cut off people's feet. It depends on what the conditions are. It can't be a moral rule to save people's lives. It depends upon what the conditions are. Suppose he's going to be Hitler. Should I save him then? You have to save everybody. You can't stand by. No one would say that. I say, if he's going to be Hitler, let him drown. There's no such thing as a moral rule that doesn't take into account the background conditions. But that's another issue. The issue we're talking about, I'm saying we can agree on the moral rules. I'm not challenging their moral rules. No, the point's not getting across. If I say to a person, it's right to cut off a person's foot when he has gangrene, another person says it's wrong. Am I challenging his moral rules? Am I disagreeing with his moral? Not at all. What I'm saying is you're ignorant of the facts. If you understood the facts the way I do, where you know the choices are cut off his foot and he lives, leave his foot on and he dies. If you understood that, you'd understand that according to your moral rules, you should cut off his foot. I'm not challenging his moral rules. I'm saying he's failing to take into account the background. Yeah.
How do we understand the different sections now, specifically Shuvim and the very own?
How do we understand them?
What's the point of different Divrei Hayamim specifically, and initially when
Well, Divrei Hayamim is a recounting of the history of the entire Tanakh, starting from the creation all the way down to the end of the Tanakh, the recounting of the history. Now, who did the art scroll Divrei Hayamim? I'm trying to remember now. I can't remember the editor, but he has a whole essay there in the beginning that you should look at the beginning, the introduction to the art scroll Divrei Hayamim, Chronicles, because there he points out that there are different reasons for writing down history, different purposes that writing down history serves. And if you look carefully in the oral tradition, you'll see that the way the history is recounted, let's say in the Torah and in the prophets, serves one purpose, and the way it's recounted in Chronicles serves a different purpose. And that's why there are differences of emphasis, and there are differences of style, and some differences of presentation. The differences are that the books were written for different purposes. Typically, they don't differ in factual matters, and they don't differ in the actual recounting of history, but they differ in purpose. Maybe some of you have heard the idea when Korach leads his rebellion against Moses. So it says Korach ben Yisro ben Kohas ben Levi. It traces his lineage back to Levi. It doesn't say Ben Yaakov. So Rashi says right away, it doesn't say Ben Yaakov. So it means that Yaakov said, I don't want my name associated with this rebellion. The naive, ignorant reader says, what do you mean? Everybody knows who Levi's father was. Everybody knows it's Yaakov. So what do you have to, of course it doesn't have to tell me that. But that's just ignorant, because in Divrei Hayamim, in Chronicles, it recounts the same incident, and it goes all the way back and says Yaakov. So if in Divrei Hayamim it says Yaakov, and here it doesn't say Yaakov, then you have to explain why one verse mentions Yaakov, one verse doesn't. And the answer is, Yaakov said that he doesn't want his name associated with rebellion, from which the later Sfarim say, every one of us has a piece of Yaakov in him, and what Jacob said was, when there is this rebellion or other failures, don't let the piece of me that's in the Jew be associated or contaminated by that failure. So there's always a way for a Jew to come back. Never does a Jew get to the point where all of him is defiled, all of him is contaminated. Right? But that's you have to take a look at the introduction there. I don't know Nach well at all. I just remember, I don't remember the details of the introduction. I remember there are two different purposes. I don't know what they are.
For someone trying to find themselves, someone struggling trying to find their role, what do you suggest that they do?
Well, in terms of finding your role, there are two levels. There's a certain basic minimum that everybody has in common. We all have the same basic Shulchan Aruch. We all have the same basic mitzvos, the same basic relationships, and we have the same basic texts. You have to be fluent in that. You have to know you have to know the information. You have to be able to read. You have to be able to understand and join in the scholarly pursuit of Torah to the extent that you're able. This is equal for everybody. And that's why institutions like Ohr Somayach exist. We have created a specialized educational program, taking people with minimal background and enabling them to jumpstart them to the point where they can get into the discussion by conquering those basics that are common to everybody. Then everybody's going to take his own path. Building, as I said before, fleshing out that skeleton is going to take his own path. One thing you need to do is have experience, and that is try to go to different families for Shabbos or for meals. People who have different styles, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Hasidic, or Yeshivish, whatever it is, and get an idea. Or when there's a chasana, or there's a siyum hashas, or there's a funeral, participate in these events. And there's a wonderful Dushinsky Hasidim over here on Shmuel Novi. When I lived here behind the yeshiva, I used to go there to count Sphira. How long does counting Sphira take? About 90 seconds. Okay, if you're really very serious about it, it could take 2 minutes. It takes then a half an hour. It takes them half an hour to count Sphira. The roof is shaking. And if you do that 2 or 3 times during Sphira, it has an impact. You think differently about Sphira. You feel differently about Sphira. I didn't become a Dushinsi Chassid, but going there for that inspiration definitely contributed to the way I do things. So you want to have a broad-based experience, from time to time, to take a look and see how different people do things, daven in different shuls, go to different yeshivas, just to see what they do. Go to Slonim, this I did 20 years ago, the Slonim Hasidim here in Meisharim, and at that time, every Shabbos we had Ben Rosh Chodesh, they had a Kiddush, and the Rosh Yeshiva was there. You walk in, and it's silent. Silent. Not a sound. Rashi walks in, they sing. He says the Torah, they sing, and they walk out. I went to another yeshiva, I won't mention which. Wasn't here. Very famous yeshiva. And leading the yeshiva, there was a very famous head. I went because someone we know from the family was making a simcha there. We went Shabbos morning to daven, came into a Kiddush. The Kiddush, talking and yelling and jokes and so forth and so on. And this famous head of the yeshiva got up to speak, and the talking and the jokes went on, and he spoke, and nobody listened. And the difference was not lost on me. The Slonim Hasidim were disciplined, focused, self-control, and the Misnagdim, who pride themselves on how much superior they are to the Hasidim, were totally uncontrolled, totally undisciplined. So I think it's good to have experiences like that, so you get a picture as to what's going on, what the options are. I don't think anybody should be in any hurry. There's no pressure to make a decision by 10 days from now, but one should have the experiences that one can and talk to people. Yeah, what else is there? Yeah.
There's a phrase in Chazal, both in regard to the prohibition against teaching women Torah Shabbat and in regard to yichud with women, Nashim Daitan Kalas. What's the accurate definition of this phrase?
That's a very good question. The literal definition would be women's da'as is light. What is da'as? That's a good question. But just before the politically savvy people come marching in, maybe it sounds somewhat derogatory to say that a person's da'as is light. Let me ask you, how would it sound to you if I said your da'as was heavy? Does that sound good? Does that sound like a point mark of praise? You have heavy da'as. Golly, if it's strong da'as or flexible da'as or an innovative da'as or creative da'as, I hear that. But heavy? It's like maybe, I don't know. Now, Aaron Feldman wrote a book, The River, the Kettle, and the Bird, about men and women and marriage. And he said it this way. He said, women are naturally more talented, it's only a comparative judgment, more talented at multitasking. The ability to switch your focus from one thing to another quickly and efficiently, and to have several things in mind at once, and to do them all well, is easier and more natural for women than it is for men. For many men, if I want to get it finished, I have to focus. Don't talk to me. Don't bother me. Don't distract me. I have to get in. It may take me 20 minutes to get in, and if I get in, don't push me out. Don't push me out till I'm finished. Right? It's a difference. So, light das means a das that's easy to move from one point to another. And a heavy das would mean a das that wants to stay put until something's finished, and then do the next thing. Now, that's a light das is an advantage if you are faced with multitasking. And a heavy das is an advantage if there are certain things that need to be accomplished, which need single-minded attention to be able to be accomplished. Running a home And as was typically the case for Jewish women throughout history, not only did they run a home, but they had to work to provide. Men worked also. If mother and father didn't both work, you starved. So she had to run a home, and she had to work. Her husband had to work. She's multitasking, and if she can't multitask, she's going to fail. The thing's going to go down the drain. She's got to be able to multitask. And a man who may have one profession, and he's doing one thing, may be able to focus much more practically on the one thing that he's doing without having to multitask. So that's the way he described it. Now, the question of yichud, which is a matter of the ease of seduction, is a similar thing, moving you from one focus to another focus. When the challenge is to keep a single focus. What was the other context that you mentioned?
Teaching women Torah.
Oh, there it doesn't say that. It says, that's Kalarihim. There is,
The Rambam writes Kalas Aleihim.
yeah. I'll tell you. There, if you look at the Rambam carefully, I'm quoting Rabbi Mazelman now. The Rambam says there that women are obligated to study practical or applicable Torah, and the rest of Torah is Ena Mitzvah V'Osa. They're not obligated, they're invited to do so. And they will receive a reward if they do so. Now, first thing to notice is that God is not in the habit of shooting himself in the foot. If God invites women to study all of Torah, it couldn't be that they're incapable of understanding it. That would just be self-defeating. But he didn't obligate them to do it. And then the Rambam inserts in that halacha the general proposition that a mitzvah that is mitzvah v'osa, which you're obligated to do, is one that you get more reward for than a mitzvah that's just invited to do. And that's true in Kol Torah Kula, everywhere. But he put it in there. And then he says, I think the word there is ein data mechuvenes alehem, if I'm not mistaken. That's the words that Rambam writes. Ein data mechuvenes alehem le'islamit. And the explanation is that since women know that it is only invited, it's not obligatory, so it's a peripheral mitzvah, so they know that it's spiritually foolish to invest a great deal of time and effort in a mitzvah that is spiritually peripheral. They want to make their investment in a mitzvah that's spiritually central. That's what a wise person does. The Rambam is putting it in not just as a footnote to general information that applies to all over the Torah. He's putting it in because it explains the situation here. And by the way, the Rambam uses the words rov noshim ein data mechuvenes alehem l'islamit. I think I'm quoting it word for word. Rov noshim. Rov noshim means the majority of women. That means it can't be built in. It can't be part of a woman's created nature that she's not focused on learning, because if that were true, it would have to be for all of them. So what the Rambam is saying, the Torah Tamima and the mitzvah brings a tshuva from Italy, from the late Rishonim, early Achronim, who says this halacha l'maisa. I forget who the author of the tshuva is. That if you have a woman in a minority who, for whatever reason, her mind is focused on learning, then you could teach her. Just that you don't want to set up institutions, because the vast majority of women, because it's spiritually peripheral, don't invest in it, don't want to invest in it, because they're busier investing in things that are spiritually essential for them. Take a look at Rabbi Mazelman's chapter on women's study of Torah. The book is called Jewish Woman and Jewish Law. The classic text in that subject. Back.
Could you tell us something on how to connect Hanukkah and Rosh Hashanah?
I can do something. This is not too profound. But the episode with the brothers selling Yosef, there's a lot there that people don't pay attention. I'm not going to explain it great length. I'm just going to tell you what it says. Joseph was coming to check on his brothers because his father sent him to do it. They saw him from afar. When he had not yet approached, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, look, that dreamer is coming. So now come and let us kill him. Let us throw him into one of the pits. And we will say a wild beast devoured him. Then we will see what became of his dreams. Reuven heard and rescued him from their hand. He said, we will not strike him mortally. They write it as a statement. Maybe it's a question. We will not kill him. And Reuven said, that means it's a separate speech. He said to them, we will not strike him mortally, and he waited for a response. Then he said the following, shed no blood, throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, intending to rescue him from their hand to return him to their father. So he says to them, we shouldn't kill him, and they say, are you nuts? Of course we're going to kill him. Of course we're going to kill him. He deserves to die. We discussed that. He's committed crimes that he deserves to die. Of course we're going to kill him. So Reuven tries again. Reuven says, shed no blood. Don't you spill blood. Throw him into the pit. How does that help? Why should they agree to that? Because, as the Torah says, the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And the oral tradition comments, but snakes and scorpions there were in it. And they all knew that. They were shepherds in the area. So Reuven is saying, don't spill his blood. Throw him into the pit and let the snakes and scorpions do it. Don't dirty your hands with blood. And they say, okay, good idea. We won't kill him ourselves, but he's got to die. He has to die. We'll throw him into the pit, and the snakes and scorpions will do him in. Now, one proof of this is that when they see the Ishmaelites, and Yehuda says, I think Yehuda suggests selling him to the Ishmaelites. What does Yehuda say? Yehuda says, what gain will there be if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. So you see that their plan was he's dying. He's definitely going to die. Now Yehuda says, listen, we can make a profit on this. Why should we just let him die? But the alternative is if he stays in the pit, he's going to die. That's how Reuven was able to convince them to sell, to throw him in the pit. Okay, so now, what was Reuven's idea? Okay, so if they kill him, they'll kill him. They throw him in the pit, he'll die in the pit. What was Reuven trying to accomplish? Don't tell me he was trying to just keep their hands clear of blood, because the Torah says, intending to rescue him from their hand and return him to their father. He thinks he's rescuing Joseph. How is he rescuing him? Says the Orach Chaim, quoting, come out word for word, Zohar. I'm putting it in my words, but this is what he says. Maybe Joseph's merit is such that if he's thrown into the pit, God will do a miracle and save him from the snakes and scorpions. But if the brothers get hold of him, they'll kill him. They will succeed in killing him. In other words, to put a little flesh on the picture, there are 3 levels of merit. Maybe Joseph is such a gigantic tzaddik that he can't die. He just can't die. The brothers will pick up a knife, their hands will become paralyzed. Put him in this pit, snakes and scorpions will do nothing to him. Then Reuven's doing nothing. Reuven's doing nothing. He'll be saved either way. Maybe Joseph has so little merit that if the brothers stab him, he'll die, and he goes into the pit with snakes and scorpions, they'll kill him. Then Reuven is doing nothing. The only way in which Reuven could be doing something is if Joseph's merit is in the middle, where if he's thrown into the pit, God will do a miracle and save him. But if the brothers stab him, he'll die. Then by changing it from the brothers stabbing him to being thrown into the pit, he's saving his life. Now, Reuven doesn't have to know the truth. It could just be a possibility. There are 3 possibilities. In 2 possibilities, my efforts are totally worthless. But in the middle possibility, says Reuven to himself, my efforts will save his life. And that was his kavanah. That was his intention. If he's in the middle level, I'll be saving his life. Okay. Now the question is this. Imagine he's in the middle level. Isn't that a little problematic? I'm supposed to imagine that if he's thrown in the pit, God will do a miracle to save him. But if the brothers stab him, he'll die. What does God want here? Does God want Joseph alive? Or does God want Joseph dead? Surely if God wants Joseph alive, then the brothers can't kill him. They're not stronger than God. And if God wants Joseph dead, then he'll die across the board. What God wants has to happen. That reasoning is a mistake. And it's a mistake in many areas where the same reasoning is mimicked. Because it doesn't take into account that God might want different things for the different scenarios. It's perfectly consistent to say, in the pit, God wants Joseph alive, and at the hands of the brothers, he wants him dead. Because God has a commitment to free will. A commitment to free will. And even when a person's life should be preserved, if you take into account only that person's life, whether he's worth living or not, when that life comes up against free will, it could be that free will is more important. And that's how it could be that God will save him in the pit, and yet the brothers will be able to kill him. Yaakov Weinberg, Zichrono Livracha of Ner Yisrael, I met him once, and I asked him about this, and he put in a very important piece of background. And the truth is, I found it again. I found it in the Chazal, and I found it somewhere in the Orach Chaim, and I lost them both. I didn't write them down, so I lost them both. But I know I saw them. He says, you're living, I'm living, we're continuing to live. Why? Why is God keeping us alive? There are two possibilities. Either we have earned life in terms of strict justice, we've lived up to the very highest possible standard, and we deserve life, or we're living on mercy. Don't know about you, but my guess is that I'm here through mercy. Lots and lots. So now, said Rav Weinberg, coming up against another human being's free will can cost you mercy. God is not going to use his mercy to undo, to prevent a human being's free will. But if someone has earned the right to live in terms of strict justice, he's passed the very highest test, then God indeed will trump free will and stop the murderer so that it can't happen. But this shows you the immense investment that God makes in free will. By the way, this means, it's not only the Orach Chaim, but it's Rashi, and it's the Ramban, and it's the Hemek Davar, and Rav Dessler, and the Zohar, who say this, and there may be others that I don't know, but those are the ones that I do know. If you want to see the references, by the way, on my website, there's a button called Lectures, and on Lectures it has outlines of my shiurim, and this one is called The Reality of Evil. There's a whole section there with the references there. Anyway, so now what this shows you is God's tremendous commitment to free will. The world was created for the sake of free will operating, and therefore it has almost unlimited power to do it. And this means, by the way, when you go to a funeral and someone dies, and a speaker says, it must be that he finished his job in this world. If he died through the efforts of someone else's free will, that doesn't have to be true. That doesn't have to be true. It may be that left on his own, he would have continued to live because he had more to do. But when he came up against somebody else's free will trumped it. Of course, that will mean he'll have to come back and do it. He'll have to come back in another life. Okay, now, what you have in the case of Hanukkah is a horrible atrocity. What triggered the rebellion, one of the things that triggered the rebellion was setting up a statue to Zeus, a statue to Zeus in the temple, and offer pigs in the temple to Zeus. Pigs, by the way, was typical, was common. Indeed, if you go back to ancient times, when archaeologists do excavations, they can always identify a place where Jews had an altar, because there are no pig bones and no figurines. And every place else, there are pig bones and figurines. But to do that in the temple, for us, was an absolute atrocity. The Maccabee family, Yosef and his sons, started a rebellion. Was there any hope to that? Any hope to that? Any anticipation that they could possibly succeed? They said, we cannot stand for this. We cannot stand. Why? If we die in the effort we have to die, it just can't be tolerated. It cannot be tolerated. Now, it's that kind of I don't know what the right word is. That kind of courage is not the right word. It's a kind of totally giving yourself over to what needs to be done, even at the cost of dying to do what needs to be done. That is something that God rewards. When the Jewish people were standing at the Red Sea, and you had a range of mountains on both sides, the sea on this side, and you had the Egyptians bearing down on them. And as my Rabbi Zatzal said, there were lots of suggestions. One said, let's climb the mountains and hide. And one said, let's fight the Egyptians. And one said, let's wave a white flag, and surrender to the Egyptians. No one thought of walking into the water. Moses said, walk into the water. Nachshon ben Aminadab jumped in and went out to his neck and was going. That's when the sea split. That's what caused the sea to split. That's what he said to be done. That's what needs to be done. And that's what's being done no matter what. No matter what. When God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, the Medrash says that the Satan made a gigantic river in the path. Abraham didn't say, oh, look at that, a river. I'll do it next month. Because, no, he didn't say that. He waded out into the river up to his neck. And he said, God, you told me to do this, I'm going. And the river disappeared. That's what it took. That was part of the test, to see whether he would look for an excuse or whether he would push. One of the things you learn here is that against what looked to be impossible odds, if you make that free-willed gesture, if you make that free-willed commitment, then God will reward it. Now, in the case of the Parsha, it's on the negative side, is what the brothers could have done to Joseph because of their free will. Over here is the positive use of free will. But there's one way you could link them in terms of the power of free will. Yeah.
How do you overcome judging others?
How do you overcome judging others? It's very difficult. Sorry? What Nachman says, he quotes a Chazal, you cannot be punished for any action you perform unless you condemn it yourself. So you read that and you think, ha, what a great way out! What a great way out! Makes no difference what I do. Makes no difference whatsoever what I do. I'm not going to condemn it. Why should I condemn it? Answer is God parades your actions in front of you in other people. And when you see them in other people, you don't recognize that they're your actions. And then you judge them objectively. And later on, when you're shown your record and you're asked how you feel about it, you say, oh, that's okay. You say, okay, but look over here. Look what you said to him. It's the same thing, and you said to him he's a bum. So then that judgment. So you can save yourself if you don't judge anybody else. Okay, but that's very difficult. One thing you can do is this. Try to be conscious of the fact that you have two different systems running in your head at the same time, all the time. One is a system for me, and the other system for everybody else. He came late again. What a bum. I came late again. I was tired and I was worried and I had to answer that email and so on and so on. And, the battery's running down on my clock, so the alarm was not. I have all sorts of excuses for myself. I just don't have excuses for anybody else. But I don't know. Do I know what's going on in his life? Do I know what he's suffering? Do I know what he's up against? If I would just take the excuses I use for myself and just replay them in looking at somebody else's actions, at the very least, Baal Shem Tov said this, at the very least, even if what he did was wrong, and that even could be questioned, but even if what he did was wrong, he might not be a vicious criminal because of it. He might be someone who's just stressed out and incapable of handling whatever it is he's handling. A very good book called The Other Side of the Stories, put out by Rabbi Samet and his Rebbitzin. Real life situations where people saw other people doing things and personally interacted with them, and the truth was just beyond their ability to have anticipated, and they felt very bad afterwards. There were two women in the Mattersdorf area who knew each other well and stopped to talk and converse on a regular basis. One's walking down the street and sees the other one coming, anticipates having a conversation. She says hello, the other one just keeps walking. Just keeps walking. What? What happened? Did I do anything to her? Did I forget to invite her to a simcha? Did I slight her in any way? She goes through. No, I didn't do anything to her. So why did she treat me like that? That's not right. What she did is not right. It's not appropriate. And she works up a whole thing in her mind, and that's it. If she could treat me like that, it's over. It's over. I'm not talking to her again. 6 weeks later, she's in the street, and that other woman's coming down the street, and this one thinks, oh, there she is, boy, oh boy. And the other one stops her and says, hello, I haven't seen you in a while, have you been? And this one says, what's going on? What's going on? Finally, she can't contain herself. She says, I saw you 6 weeks ago. I saw you on the street. I said hello, and you didn't say hello to me. What happened? What was going on there? The other one thinks and says, oh, 6 weeks ago. I guess I didn't tell you. My twin sister was visiting me from America. Twin sister. Just a twin sister. It wasn't her, it was her twin sister. She built up this whole thing in her mind when it was really... Now, do you have to anticipate that it's a twin sister? Well, maybe, because read the book and you'll see, dozens of stories of people who couldn't have anticipated what the truth was, and then the truth turned out to be entirely different from what they thought. At any rate, that's another way. He says, use the excuses you use for self for other people. Realize that other people can have conditions that you're not aware of, and they're under terrible stress. I know a case of a person who was dying. For whatever reason, he chose not to tell anybody. The normal rule is if you have a serious illness, you tell people and they daven for you. That's the normal procedure. He didn't tell anybody. If he ever spoke irritably to somebody or something and so on, I knew he was dying. Others didn't know that. When they found out later, when he died, they had to think back and say, I didn't know he was dying. Right, you didn't know. That's right, you didn't know. But you could have said to yourself, the world is a very complicated place, and there may very well be good explanations for what he did, even if it's a failure. But there may be good explanations as to what pushed him to do it, and I shouldn't judge him in that negative a fashion.
Sometimes usually you do it firsthand, you just think something like, oh, he's doing this, and then afterwards you put him to, how do you make that your first thing?
I wouldn't be that strict. Maybe great people could train themselves to the point where it would be a natural.
More Danakov's host,
Yeah, but maybe I could be medayik. Dan is not what you first thought. Ladun is a process, and it requires having masunim b'din, it says, right? You should be calm and cautious in din. Take your time and think it over, and don't go with your first impression. A good thing to do would be, in general, to be cautious about first impressions about anything.
Sometimes you see someone generalizing, right?
But I think it would be enough if you could achieve a habit of saying, okay, that's what I thought at the moment, but let's think about it again. Let's go back over it again, let's think of alternatives, and make it into a regular review policy. I think that would be a tremendous achievement in and of itself. Get it to be the first thing? No, that's... And by the way, the Rambam, I was so happy when I saw this, because I'm a rationalist at heart. And there are certain commentaries that are very rationalistic, like Tosfos. Tosfos is very rationalistic. Wants everything that makes sense, period. The Rambam says, Havidan kol ha'adam l'chavschus. Judge everyone favorably. The Rambam says, suppose you have a person who you know is a tzaddik. He's a great, righteous person. And he does something that's questionable. Maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. You judge him favorably, not because the Mishnah told you, but because it's plain logic. He has a reputation of being a very righteous person. Then, of course, the counsel of plain reason is that you judge it favorably because the overwhelmingly likely it is favorably. And the same is true with the negative side. If you know a person's a criminal, and you know he does things wrong, and he has bad values, and you see him do something that's questionable, it could be either good or bad, it's appropriate to judge him negatively and say what he did was bad, because that's the kind of person that he is. Where you have a person who's a Beinoni, he's, like most of us, a mixture of good and bad, and he does something that's ambiguous, where the counsel of reason would be that you should be neutral and not draw a conclusion either way, that's where the Mishnah says judge in favor. That's not dictated by reason, not counter to reason either, but it's not dictated by reason. That's where the Mishnah wants you to go. Once you hear that, it makes it much easier to deal with. If you thought that you had to take every wicked person and you know what he's doing is wrong and say, no, judge him favorably, no, that would be, it's illogical and it's not necessary, not required. It's not required. Yeah.
Regarding what you were saying before, your answer, our men who are Balabatim, who only learn an hour, 2 hours, once a day, right? What do you say to that? They're not, let's be honest, they're not going to let you master shots the way someone who's learning Kel would.
So I'll tell you what Rav Dessa says, and maybe I'll just add one little thing, then we have to quit. Rav Dessa says this. So imagine a person who has a brilliant mind and a photographic memory, and he learns 4 hours a day and easily finishes shots and remembers it, and he becomes an outstanding scholar and so forth and so on. Right? When he comes to the world to come, he'll remember nothing. Nothing. Great scholar, he'll have nothing. Now imagine a person who finds concentration very difficult, and he's poor, and he's got to work, and he's supporting aged parents, and it's wartime, and he's forces himself to sit down at night for 45 minutes, and he falls asleep over the Gemara, and he ends up with almost no knowledge and understanding. When he goes to the world to come, he'll be a great scholar, because everything depends upon effort. Everything depends upon effort. Not the outcome that you have in this world, but everything depends upon effort. So the fact that a person is not going to master Shas is not the issue. The issue of mastering Shas is what the gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you at the end for the sake of your effort, like we said at the beginning of the hour. Right? That's not the issue. The issue is, did I make the best effort that I could? That's all you have, like we said at the beginning of the hour. That's all you have to be responsible for, and that's what you'll be rewarded for. Ramchal says that 3 or 4 times in the Derech Hashem, and in one context, the context of Talmud Torah. Everything is determined by the effort that you put forth. Now, whether you are sitting in kollel or whether you are a working person and you're putting aside extra time to learn, depends upon your circumstances. If you have a responsibility to support a family, then you are obligated by Jewish law to work and do it. If you have millions behind you, and you say, but I just love trading on the stock market, then you're a bum. If you have the money, learn. But if you don't have the money and you have to work, then work. And learn when you can. And each one is doing what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. I'll tell you something which very few people know, because when you study the Mesilas Yesharim, everybody studies it, but very few people get to the end. And at the very end of the Mesilas Yesharim, the last 2 paragraphs, he says this. That's the chapter on Kedusha, holiness, the highest level of all the accomplishments. He says, the Mesilas Yesharim is a book divided into half. The first half, first 17 chapters, are about being a tzaddik, and the last 9 are about being a chassid. There are 26 chapters. Hint, hint. Now, he says, chassid is a concept, and it can apply to different lives. The same concept can apply to different lives. And the concept, as it applies to each different type of life, will require different types of fulfillment, but it's the same concept. What are the 3 types of lives? One type of life is a person who's studying and teaching Torah all the time. Another type of life is a person who's independently employed, he has his own business. And the third type of life is a hired worker. And the concept of chassid applies to all 3. All 3 can achieve that ultimate condition of being a chassid. Of course, being a chassid in learning is one thing. Being a chassid in running your own business is another thing. And being a chassid and being an employed worker is another thing. But all 3 can earn the title chassid. There are certain groups that don't get to the end of the Mesilas Yesharim because they don't want to have to deal with it. I won't mention who they are. But it makes very interesting reading, and I recommend it to all of you. Same Ramchal who wrote the beginning about Prishus and Zrizus and Tara wrote the end as well. And that means that the fact that a person is a balabos and he's working does not cut him off from any spiritual achievement. he can have the same spiritual achievement as the Rosh Hashiva. They can both earn the title of chassid. Okay, it's very important.